is just a huge honor for me today to be podcast interviewing Chris Moriarity with the Productive Dentist Academy. That's productivedentist.com. He's been with Bruce Beard, Vicky Mans for how long? 5 years?
Yeah, going on 5 years. I think I've known him for about a decade and joined him full-time about 5 years ago.
And you used to work with Kim Cooch?
Yeah, that was kind of my introduction to dentistry. I had some relationships with some of the folks working for him at Oral Biotech, producing Carie Free and trying to spread the word about Canberra. So wound up teaming up with him. And if anybody's heard him speak, I mean, he's so infectious with his passion and his knowledge that instantly I wanted to be a part of it. So I think the last year with them, I think I did 38 speaking engagements all around the country, just making sure that folks knew how to better take care of folks who were suffering from what can arguably the number one disease in the country, which is dental caries.
Way back in the day, I lectured 30, 40 times with Kim, where it'd be, we each took half the day. And it was when air abrasion came out, because he's always been into minimally invasive dentistry. Mm-hmm. And me and him, those are some good times. Let me read your bio. Chris Moriarty, MA.FA, is the Vice President of Client Relations for the Productive Dentistry Academy. As an SEC-listed stockbroker and student of behavioral economics, Mr. Moriarty has worked with hundreds of dental offices to help them become more effective at case acceptance, marketing, branding, and inter-office communication. You may have witnessed his unique style and viewpoint on ABC's Shark Tank or HGTV's Island Life. As a fervent defender of small business, Mr. Moriarty believes that everyone has the right to be successful, and his job is help shape their ability to do so. So you were on Shark Tank?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting opportunity that happened a couple of years ago where they did a version of the show which was live. So the whole idea was, just like on the regular television show, you've got 5 minutes to pitch and then 10 minutes to defend, but they did it in front of 1,000 people down in LA. So rather than you competing just for their investment, you competed against 5 other teams and only one person was going to get the money. Now, to put another twist on it, rather than having to give up equity in the company, you actually got the money as a tax-free grant that was put up by Miller Lite, Miller Coors out of Chicago. So we flew down there, got up there, and we were fortunate enough to have Dame and John back us, and we got some money out of the deal.
And what business did you start?
So this one came again out of my younger brother-in-law and I, who's just he works for Kim Cooch as well. So they've got all the science and technology you could possibly think of. And one day he basically realized with his skill set, if we can think it, we can make it. So we started just looking around at just kind of fun stuff outside of dentistry. And we realized that under the age of 44, about 38% of the population has at least one tattoo, right? And turns out they're not going anywhere. So doing a little bit of market analysis, you realize that there were no department store brands. There were no upscale sort of skincare products developed for that specifically. And it was a huge hole in the market. So we said, well, somebody's going to take it. So we developed a product and pitched it to them. And it's called Enzo Inc. And it exists today because of it.
Enzo Inc.?
Mm-hmm. ENSOINK, Enzo Inc. And the way that it works is pretty simple. And we're developing some new dental products now as well. But basically what happens is when you get tattoos, you have these different colors. And of course, they degrade at different rates when the sun hits them. So the lighter blues, the lighter greens and whatnot actually age faster. So as people get tattoos at different times of their life, they tend to age at inconsistently. So especially with women who maybe they have an event, a ball gown, a wedding where something's showing that doesn't normally show, by putting this product on there, it has these silicone oils with an incredibly high refractive index. So it just reflects more light than anything else. So it brings these colors back. Everything looks even, looks really nice for about 5 to 6 hours, and does its job well.
So I think you have tattoos then.
I do. Professionally, I would never do that. But of course, underneath this plaid shirt is a litany.
So you know why I don't have any tattoos, seriously?
Tell me, sir.
Because you'll never see a bumper sticker on a Ferrari.
You know, and I used to say the same thing, only I used BMW. Don't see bumper stickers on that.
I'm just kidding. Right. So I was one of those asshole dads that said when my kids were in college, my rules, if I'm paying for your college,
yep.
No drugs, no tattoos, blah, blah, blah. No tattoos, one of them. So 2 of my 4 boys, 2 of the 4, the minute They left school the minute they graduated.
Yep.
Oh my God. And I feel really bad about my oldest son's tattoo because he's 27 and when he was little and they came out with that biohazard sign on the infection control deal, the boys were visiting me at the dental house one day and I showed it to Eric. I said, man, isn't that just the coolest logo? That biohazard deal. His first tattoo was the biohazard on his shoulder.
See?
And it looks so cool. And one of these days I'm going to grow a pair and get a matching biohazard on my shoulder to match my son. And I would do it. I'd do it today, but he's not done with it. Because, whenever these kids get a tattoo, they keep adding. And
yep, we're just working on one big one.
Yeah,
and it's funny, it's not too late because my dad kind of made the same deal with me. So I wanted to get one right out of the gates when I was 18. And he said, how about when you graduate college, we'll do it together. So graduated college, then graduated grad school. And of course, by then, I already had a few. So finally, my father's been in wealth management was in wealth management for about 30 years. And 4 months ago, he and my mom, for his 60th birthday, we all went and got tattoos together. So it's never too late.
Wow, that is amazing. So your job is to get me Kim Cooch on this show. I'd love to.
Not a problem.
He's always been for prevention, and like every orthodontist will lecture for 40 days and 40 nights on ortho and Invisalign, but they never ever spend any time telling these parents that 400 years ago there was no malocclusion.
Yep.
And it's because you didn't nurse your baby. The minute that baby had trouble nursing, they switched to a bottle and a sippy cup, so the baby never used the muscles of mastication, and they feed it, crap out of applesauce out of a jar, so the baby never chewed anything. And all of this causes the malformation of the jaws and muscles and face, and then you have to go in there and dump $6,500 of ortho in there.
Yep.
So I really have always loved Kim and this fact that his dedication to prevention. The first thing I did when I got to Phoenix is spent 2 years getting Phoenix fluoridated, the water fluoridated, because I thought, well, hell, that would prevent 100 times more cavities than I could ever drill, fill, and bill in my lifetime. And when the city council voted that in 8-1, I really felt like I was done. I could just pack up my bags and go home. I did more dentistry than I ever would have done sitting on an assembly line, drilling and filling and billing. And so speaking of drilling and filling and billing, you work with arguably the most productive dentist I know. I mean, Bruce sits around and cruises at like $3,500 an hour in production. And when you tell other dentists that, most dentists don't do $3,500 a day themselves.
Right.
And if they can do $2,500 to $3,000, they're crushing it. And then you tell them about Bruce, and their first thought is, that ain't so. No, sir. and then they think, well, he's in Beverly Hills. He's in Key Biscayne. He's in Manhattan. He's in Bumblebutt Nowhere, Texas. What
population
town is he
6,000. So he's in Granbury, Texas, and of course Granbury, Texas. It's about an hour outside of Fort Worth. And what people don't realize,
Googled it and it said you're lost.
Yeah, pretty much. If you look at the middle, he's right in the center of it. And of course, the interesting thing is there's only 6,000 people in the whole town. There's only 45,000 people in the whole county. So Bruce's average new patient drives between 75 and 100 miles to come and see him. And for the last 15 years, he's worked 2 days a week and produces between 3,500 and 3,800 an hour. So the first assumption is that he's just slinging porcelain from left to right, or he's just doing full mouth rehabs all day. So what wound up happening is on Dentaltown. In fact, Dentaltown is how he met his business partner, Jeff Buski, because Jeff Buski was reading about his production and just called him out. He said there is no way, because he was LVI, backwards, forwards, he's a dentist, and he was producing like 300 an hour. He said either you're ripping people off, you're doing 60-second crown preps, you're not taking good care of people. And Bruce said, you know what? You're an hour away. Get in the car. Come on down. Look at what I do, and I'm going to show you. And that's how they became friends, through Dentaltown, and they've been partners now for 15 years.
And we've even had people get married on Dentaltown. In fact, I just had the idea 2 days ago that we already had the classified ads, and Craigslist is a huge dating website,
Absolutely.
And I'm going to add that to Dentaltown, and everybody's going to think it's on the classifieds. Everybody's going to think it's crazy, but there are some amazing marriages that met on Dentaltown, and amazing dentist partnerships, associates. I mean, life is just about relationships, and that's what I really liked about you. You always talk about behavioral economics.
Yes.
And I bet you every dentist you're talking to right now has never even heard those two words together. What is
Yeah.
behavioral economics?
So behavioral economics is kind of the study of why we do what we do in a consumer setting. So the reason that this really became sort of a passion of mine was in working with dentists, you see a lot of people who are very good at math. You see a lot of people who can put a plan down on paper and then find themselves incredibly frustrated when things don't take kind of your traditional linear path. Because as long as you've got human beings involved, it's going to be fairly erratic, and it just drives dentists crazy. So a lot of it, when I talk and when I lecture, when I teach to people, I want to bring things up that they just might not be aware of. Why will you wear Nikes but not Adidas? Why will you drive a BMW and never even consider a Mercedes? We're being conditioned from very early in life to have specific thoughts, feelings, and opinions about things that we have no idea about. And of course, dentistry, just how apropos for that topic, most people have thoughts, feelings, and opinions about procedures they've never had. And what I've found through my research is that most people's opinions are based on complete fiction. So we kind of walk through and we peel back the layers about, why do you operate this way in your office? Why do you guys communicate this way? Who do you think you are in this community? Who are you really? And how do we tell that story? Because as you know, and the thing that's of course made you kind of the man you are today is you are 100% authentic. You ooze authenticity in everything that you do, the way that you speak, the way that you write, this show, all that kind of stuff. And patients respond well to that. What they don't want to do, and what I hear a lot, people will say, well, what's Bruce do? How does Bruce do this? How does he talk to his patients about that? And what I have to remind them continually is, you're not Bruce. And I'm not trying to make you Bruce. Dr. Smith, I want you to be the best Dr. Smith you can be. Now let's figure out what those things are. Because a lot of this is going to translate and pull back to, of course, their marketing message. Every dentist I know has had the experience when they sit down with a patient across the chair and it just clicks. Like all of a sudden, it's like they've known them their entire lives, and they just have this rapport back and forth. They understand what you're laying down, and they've had the opposite of that happen, where they sit down and, man, it doesn't matter what they say, how do they try to explain it, it's just not working. So we have some exercises that I've developed over time to kind of walk people through, how do we get more of those people that you just click with? What words do you use? How can we be intentional with our messaging to bring those people in through the door? To make a long story longer, there's people like me that study this everywhere. Like obviously, like when you go to the grocery store, you probably swipe a little card. You get your discounts that way. We have a Safeway up here, so we have a Safeway card. And what most people may or may not realize is what they're doing is they're collecting data, right? They want to know everything that you're buying because they have basic demographic information about you, your zip code, where you live, who you are, when you're born, and what are you buying? Because with that data, that's how they're going to sit there and design their whole store around it. I got a buddy of mine that I graduated with. He works for a grocery business, and this guy is spooky good with just a handful of demographic information, zip code, age, gender. He can basically predict within about a 90% accuracy every single thing that's in your refrigerator. But when I go to a dentist, and your talk at Townie last year was about owning your numbers and knowing your numbers, everyone knows about the old Pareto principle, the 80-20. Right? Where 80% of your revenues are coming from 20% of your patients. But most dentists have absolutely no idea who their 80-20 are. Who are your VIPs? Who's actually footing the bill for most of what you're doing? I travel a lot, as a lot of folks like me do. And I'm always looking for inspiration outside of dentistry. So I'm always looking, what are the biggest companies in the country doing? How did they get that big? And what are some things that we can replicate and bring into dentistry? And one, as a frequent flyer, is the way I'm a Delta guy, but I've been flying Delta, I don't even know how long, but I've got a status with Delta right now that's so high that if a flight's sold out and I want to get on, they'll kick somebody else off. And most people hear that and they think, well, gosh, that's super duper unfair. It's really not. Trust me, I live there. They should be treating me a little bit better. But what they figured out, and I had a Delta executive explain this to me, they just simply did the math. And they realized that for every diamond flyer they keep, they could lose 50,000 regular flyers and still make more money. Because a guy like me is going to fly 3, 4, 5 times a month sometimes, where the regular flyer might take 1 vacation, maybe 2 a year. They want to keep me happy at all costs. So what I encourage offices to do is to, oh, this is cool. This is a really cool thing. When you hit this status, something changes. Like if you have like a frequent flyer card, it's always plastic, you keep it in your wallet. When you hit diamond, the card is metal and the connector to your bag is also metal. And I didn't think about this for a long time till one day it hit me why they do that. It's because they can hear you coming. It's audible. It jingles and jangles. So when they're up there at that desk professionally ignoring you, they hear that jingle jangle, walk up, they snap to attention. What can I do for you, Mr. Moriarty? They know I'm different. They're going to give me a different experience. So when I pull this into dental offices, I say we have every opportunity in the world to look at your schedule in the morning and figure out who your VIPs are. And typically in the South, one of the responses that I hear as well, we treat all of our patients like VIPs. And you know what I tell them? Don't. I go, if everybody's special, then nobody's special. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't treat everyone with dignity and respect and have the highest level of customer service. But when somebody has chosen your office, and believe me, they chose it above a lot of other competitions. I don't care who you are. So when we have a case value or maybe a specific procedure that we want to do more of, that person's going to be identified in the morning. And when they come in, they don't necessarily need a reward. What they need is a higher level of recognition. So sometimes it's as simple as putting a different bib on them. Sometimes in one office, we just put a Post-it note on the doorstop. So as the team's walking by, they see that and they pop in and they say, Mrs. Jones, we've been waiting for your case all week. You are the perfect candidate. Can't wait to see how it comes out. We can't stop talking about it. And then they walk by. Now they're special. Now that $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 that they're spending on their smile has a little bit more validity. So a lot of it is just what are these little things that don't cost anything that we can do in the office that makes a huge difference when it comes to case acceptance and, of course, referrals down the line. So that's really what I spend a lot of my time on, either when I lecture or when people call, because as a consulting company, most people call us when they don't have any money, like when they're struggling. I'd say 60% of people who call me are scared to death. They can't make payroll. They don't know how they're going to sell their practice. They need to figure out what they can do to really turn the tide. Now, granted, that top half of folks too, those are a lot more fun. We get to flex muscles that we don't, but it's very satisfying when somebody who thought they were going to board up their doors now not only gets to turn things around, but gets to finally feel rewarded after so long.
Well, talk about some case studies. Like who typically, you're talking about calling the productivedentist.com?
Yeah.
Okay, well, who typically is calling the productivedentist.com? And what services do you provide for them? I mean, I know you can go down there live and see Bruce cranking out $3,500 an hour. But what other services do you guys do?
Yeah, and one of the things that we really wanted to be more than anything is a sounding board. Like, in fact, I taught 2 newer employees here today because we're up to 30 employees now. We're one of the larger operations that's out there. And of course,
are you talking about the dental office or
the Productive Dentist Academy, just where I sit? We have a large home office now about 70 miles north of Seattle up in the San Juan Islands because we used to just be
You're not in Texas?
No, Bruce is in Texas. The consultants are all over the place. Vicki McManus, his partner, she chose to live up in the San Juan Islands. And as a guy from Iowa, if I see something like a starfish or a seal, it might as well be a unicorn to me. So I'm all kinds of excited to live up here.
So where are you guys at?
So we're in a town called Anacortes, Washington on Fidalgo Island. So if you go 70 miles north of Seattle, we're called the gateway to the San Juan. So we've got a bridge. But then if you go due west, out across the water, you'll actually hit Victoria, BC. So we're that far north.
Holy moly, that was one of the coolest lecturing gigs I ever got. I was supposed to lecture to the Washington Dental Association meeting, and it was in Seattle and everything. Then it turns out that when I got there, that I wasn't lecturing where the whole convention was. I was to get on this boat with cars on it and all this stuff.
Yep.
And it took me way out, like an hour, and I lectured on this island, and it was like, that was the coolest thing I'd ever done in my entire flipping life. God, that was beautiful.
And one of the reasons that the building that I sit in is one of the oldest buildings in town, because the PDA started 12 years ago when it was just live events and seminars with just Bruce and a handful of docs in a room. And then over time, these doctors wanted more support. So about 6, 7 years ago-ish, we started doing the actual consulting arm. And then we started doing full service marketing and ad agency type stuff just for clients. And now that's the area of our company that's growing the most. So the building where I sit is actually filled with our designers and writers and client liaisons and all those kind of people that are way smarter than me, but I'm glad we found. So the reason I bring that up is we have a lot of our clients who will actually fly up here because we can crank out all their social media, all their video, all that stuff while they get to come to a pretty darn cool place. And you certainly have an open invitation. We'd love to show you what we can do up here.
Wow. So you said the fastest growing part is the marketing?
Yeah. And a lot of it is, to be quite honest, just kind of based on confusion. And I know it's going to sound a little bit strange, but what wound up happening was through the PDA, we have, like any business company, we've got some specific ratios we want to see. So we're going to recommend to any office that they're spending between 5 and 8% on marketing. But the reality was most of the folks who were calling me and talking to me might be spending 0.25%, half, maybe 1, anything 2. If it wasn't a super mature practice, it was usually borrowed money from a loan or something like that. So we would establish this budget, whatever it may be, and they'd run out to marketing company X, who's just trying to do a good job. I don't think there's any shysters out there. I mean, everyone out there I do believe is trying to service dentistry in a good way. But all of a sudden they'd come back with this $100,000 marketing plan that blows their budget. And we finally just got so frustrated. We said, you know what, we're going to hire our own people. And we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it the way that best services the business and the owners. So when people would graduate, they'd come through the courses, we'd meet in places, they would just start calling us saying, hey, I'm talking to this company over here. They think I should be spending X. Do you guys agree? And we'll say, oh, well, let's check out what we know about that. Let's check in our user group. So we wanted to be these trusted advisors. And that's usually just being honest and trying to help people is what's led to that growth. It wouldn't surprise you at all, some of the stories that I hear, but there's a multi-doctor practice that I could tell you about that was spending $14,000 a month just on SEO to be number one in their local area. And they called us up very frustrated, dumping piles and piles of money after something that in theory you shouldn't be able to buy. And so we had our guys look into it. And the reason that they weren't number one is they were just getting out hustled. They were getting out reviewed 19-1. They weren't active in social media. They didn't have original content, stuff that they could have done for free. And so we said, hey, just do this, make these changes. And in fact, this was just yesterday. They did get number one based on our results. They just dumped that other company, and they're one of our newest clients.
Okay, so I want to go back to the consulting arm first.
Sure.
Everybody listening to you right now is alone. They're driving to work. We do an hour show because that's what they've asked for. They got an hour commute to work. So they know them. They know their office, but they don't really know what's going on with their homies of why they would reach out to a consultant. So start giving case stories, like who's calling productivedentist.com? What is their story? What is their problem? What are you doing for them?
So typically we see 3 different groups that call. Number one are sort of the young, hungry guys and gals who are just out of school. They've got a mountain of debt. They not really sure what they're going to do, but they're on Dental Town. They're asking people what they did to get in their place. And that's probably a third. Now, the middle third is if that, I would almost say it's a little bit bigger group, but these are folks who've been doing this for maybe 10, 15 years. They're pretty burnt out. They're watching their communities change. They're watching their competition change. They don't know what to do, and they don't have the energy to figure it out. And for some of them, it's not that they've given up, but dentistry is both physically and emotionally exhausting. There's a lot of easier ways to make a living, but when these folks get in there, like when they do finally pick up the phone, usually within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we've got some ideas. Then you've got this last segment, and this is mixed up of kind of 2 different populations. One are folks who want to ramp up to sell. Like they're sitting there at 1.2, they want to bump to 1.5 or maybe all the way up to 2 so they have something healthy when they want to put it on the market. And that other little slim percentage are people who are just going 80 miles an hour. They want to go 100 miles an hour. They just don't want the wheels flying off. Because one of the things when you hear Bruce's story, we'll have guys that call me, they say, I want to be more productive, but I can't jam another patient in edgewise, right? And that's a good problem to have. I can rearrange that. The harder one is when they're twiddling their thumbs. They've just got, what do they say? The average dentist has at least 25% open time right now. I'd argue that's probably closer to 50. In most offices, they're spreading things out to look like they're busy, but they're really not. So usually when folks call me, the first thing that I do, and we do this for free, is I'm going to build you a dashboard. What I want to do is I'll sync up with your software system, and I want to go back. Usually I just take 13-week averages, but the first thing I'm looking at is the correlation between your visits and production. Meaning, do you need more visits to be more productive? Because if you want 1,000 patients looking for free whitening, No problem. I can make you busy, but you don't want to be busy. You want to be productive. So then I'm going to look at your kind of your average case size, your average case value. Are you comprehensively treatment planning? And more importantly, how are you presenting that? Because 9 times out of 10, when I go in and I look at the average lifetime value of the patient annually, it's right between $1,000 and $1,500. Why? Because that's what insurance covers. They max out their insurance and they're gone.
So that number is years production or years collection divided by active patients?
Yeah, and again, the system takes care of most of the math for them, provides all their KPIs.
But, they can just see. Are you taking a production build out or collected revenue?
Yeah, so
collections
I'm going to look at
divided by active patients.
Mm-hmm.
And you say it's usually between 1,000 and 1,500.
Yeah, almost always.
And what can it be? Go into the 80-20 rule. What would the top 20% of the dentists have?
So, and a lot of it, really what I start to ask them is just I try to illuminate, again, going back to behavioral economics. So everyone wants to comprehensively treatment plan, right? So depending on where you are in your skill set and service mix and where you are in your career, that could be anywhere between 15, 20, 25,000 easy, right? Well, in most populations, the average checking account balance is about $4,700. So my first question is, what are these patients going to do? Either they're going to do what insurance covers or what? Mortgage their house. So Bruce always uses the analogy that if we had to purchase dentistry the same way we purchase cars, nobody would own one, right? So we need to figure out how we're going to get to the source of that. How can we make people even say yes at all? So there's some different financing options, of course, that we advocate for. And I don't care what people have. Usually it's going to come down to the communication. For example, our brains are wired a pretty specific way. If I've got somebody's treatment plan in front of me, we have a really bad habit of actually handing them the treatment plan, whatever it may be, then begin to explain to them what's on it and why it's valuable and so on. It is physiologically 100% impossible to read and listen at the same time. Your brain can't do it. I don't care who you are, and I run some examples when I lecture to prove this fact. So what I teach offices to do is make one simple twist. Run the numbers all the way down. I want you to get as close to a monthly as you can. Whether you're doing in-house financing or comp finance, I don't care. Just get it down to whatever your most lenient terms are. You can always go up from there. Then literally hold that piece of paper to your chest and say, Mrs. Jones, I'm about to go through your treatment plan. And if it works within your budget, we can do this all within one visit for about $189 a month. Now let's get into the details. Now you take their side and you turn and you start going through it. Because now if it's a comprehensive treatment plan that's $15,000, the sting is gone. I'm leading with something that's possible. Most people manage their day-to-day monies, on a monthly cash flow basis. So if we can get close to that in the way they're used to buying things in a traditional consumer experience, I got a better chance of them doing more than just what the insurance is going to cover. I'm going to use that as a down payment, finance the rest, whatever it may be. But obviously, from our dentist, how much longer does it take you to prep 3 crowns versus 1? Right? If you know what you're doing, especially, but your production triples. Does the patient want to do 3 crowns in 6 visits? No, they want to do it in 1 visit. So how do we take all the parts that you have and really make that work together?
Homies, my job is to guess what they're thinking. They're saying, so you get the treatment plan and then you go get that pre-approved by care credit for the installment credit, and you get that all pre-approved before you go in there and present the treatment?
If we can. It depends on what their options are, because whether it's care credit, there's a lot of variety of options that are out there. If you're doing in-house, what I want to do is I want to simulate as much as I can a traditional consumer experience. Here's another. Speaking of Kim Cooch, here's one of the big things.
What you said is profound, because if it costs over $1,000 in the United States, 90% are going to finance it.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you want to see what it's like to buy a house in cash, go to the third world where they take 10, 20 years of building the house, and no house is finished in the entire Caribbean. They're still adding to the house. So by going in and presenting the payment, and what is this usually over how many months, how many years?
Well, if you're using a tool like Comprehensive Finance, which of course Bruce designed and we advocate for, you can go out as long as 60 months.
Okay, so that's 5 years. And you said comprehensive. God, we have so many cans of worms we got to talk about. Is Comprehensive Finance, is that a separate website, or is that on the Productive Dentist?
That is, just comprehensivefinance.com. Charles Brown over there is who you would speak to. And here's the main reason why I like Comp Finance, is for a family like mine. And in fact,
Charles
Brown, literally Charlie Brown over there.
How's Comprehensive Finance doing?
They're doing, and here's been the evolution, because they're signing up more dentists than they ever have. What they found is usually they'll go to like a CERAC meeting and they'll sign up between 80 and 100 docs every single meeting. That's never been the problem. The problem has been in the usership. And this was something that really wasn't a surprise, but what happened was these docs would run back from the office. They'd say, hey, I got this new tool. They'd throw it over to the team for the team to figure out. The team didn't understand why this was different than, say, CareCredit, why it was different than all these other things. So now what I coach the doctors to do when they sign up, I say, I want you to do this. Rather than just throwing it in the lap of your team, I want to sit down. I want you to tell them, hey, you know what, I was thinking about something. Our average treatment plan in this office is right around $15,000, whatever it may be. Let me ask you something. Regular people, like the people in this room, what would you do if it was you? Or like you were talking in the last meeting, what if this was your kid? What if this was your parent? Where would you come up with the money? And they're all like, oh my gosh, I don't really know. And then what I am setting the doctor up to say is, I came to that realization as well. So I'm bringing in this new tool that will literally allow us to help almost anybody. And once the team sees that difference, because again, the biggest difference between comp finance and some of the other tools that are out there is we're less concerned with their credit rating. There's a million reasons why people have less than perfect credit. It looks at how they manage their checking account. Are they bouncing checks all over town? Or do they actually pay their bills? They just, again, credit got dinged for whatever reason. Dentistry is such a relationship-focused vocation that these people, you might have known these people for 10 years. You know who they are. They're regular with ReCare. You want to be able to do something for them, and now you can. And of course, the interest help offset any risk and so on. But by running things out by 60 months, there's another cool thing you can do with this. If you're a CERAC guy, or you've got any sort of procedure, 6-month smiles, things that are happening in your office that have basically a fixed cost around them. You know what your lab fees are. You know what your fixed costs are. You know what your overhead is. You can take that number and run it backwards through comp finance, and then all of a sudden you can market with that. We got a gentleman down in Texas, and that's what he's doing. Loves to do comprehensive ortho, right? So by using their insurance as the down payment for $1,500, finance the rest out to 60 months, it would literally cost you $60 a month. So now I'm a mother of 3, driving around his town in Texas. All my kids need ortho, and I see that. Because again, this is the cool thing about it, and Howard, you'll appreciate this. I don't like discounting. I will not participate in the race to the bottom and who can be cheaper and quicker and give away whitening faster and faster. It's full fee. It's full fee plus because you're financing it, right? So we've not diminished the value. What we've done is we've used an instrument to mirror a traditional consumer experience, and that's how people buy. So just by making those different shifts, it's made a world of difference for our clients. You don't need to be cheap.
Okay, but you got to answer. There's a whole nother big can of worms you got to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
When you use CareCredit or Lending Tree or something like that, the patient's going to get $1 to the dentistry, and you send that out to them. You're not going to get the $1. You're going to get what? What percent is CareCredit usually going to take?
No, they're going to take 10%.
Okay, 10%. So they give you 90 cents so that you have the 90 cents. You can put that in the bank and you're done.
Exactly.
You don't have to worry. But when you do in-house financing, which Bruce Baird started, comprehensivefinance.com, you're carrying the note.
Yep.
So that
here's
your
the big
patients can default, go into the over 30, 60, 90, and next thing you know, you're at small claims with your neighbor.
So here's how it all works. And typically this is in most offices, it doesn't replace CareCredit. Because if you have a large case, I'm going to take that 10% hit to get my cash. Think of this initially. Eventually it does, people do choose to use it more widely, but just initially, what about the folks who aren't getting approved for CareCredit, or they're only getting approved for a portion of it? What are you doing? Most people don't have another option. So either that person walks out the door and tries to go find it cheaper, or you wind up just doing it a tooth at a time for the rest of their life. So we wanted to avoid that situation. We wanted to have a fallback position to where you could help anybody. Now, again, CareCredit does amazing things. They're playing by a different set of rules, because for years and years, we would tell people you do not want to be the bank. We would tell people do not do in-house financing because it is more trouble than it's worth. You're going to be running these people down. You're not in the bill collection business because, the cell phone company is going to turn off their phone. What are you going to do? You're going to repossess their crowns? You don't really have, it's just not worth it. Now, what comp finance does, and the brilliance of it, is that it's your account. meaning you are the bank, they just manage it for you. So all the statements are generated by Compassionate Healthcare Services. So they do all the soft collections, they do everything for you. And of course, what you just talked about with the defaults, the system is set up to where you can have a 20% default rate and still make more money than if you had financed it any other way. Now with that, when you log in, this is a true story. This was a CERAC 30, I think it was. And I tell everybody, sooner or later, somebody's not going to pay you. I mean, this is a numbers game, right? Just like any other lending institution in the country. That's why the banks have all the big buildings. They've figured this out, right? So this guy runs up, beelines it to the booth, and he's angry because he'd written a note to this gal of about $3,400, and she didn't make a single payment. And so what I asked him was, I go, what's your number? And what I mean by that is when you log into your system with Comp Finance, you have a dial that goes from 0 up to 100 and then plus 100 into there. The real magic number there is 90 because it's representing cents on the dollar. I always want to stay above 90. If I'm getting closer to 90, it usually means that we're approving too many high-risk people, or our interest rates aren't high enough to be offsetting our risk. Those are really the only two variables. But what we want is over time to be over 100. That's what the interest is for. I want to be at 101, 102, 3, 4, 5 cents on the dollar, right? As opposed to 90 being the best I can do. So this gentleman, I asked him what his number was, and he had no idea. So we had Charlie grab the computer. We looked in. The guy's at like 105 cents on the dollar. So what I said was, why are you even worried? Don't spend one more second thinking about this. Well, go play golf. Go do whatever. The system is set up to accommodate for this. You're making 105 cents on the dollar with your portfolio. Don't worry about it. Move on. Write her a letter. Forgive the debt.
So how long has comprehensive finance been out?
Oh, 5-6 years now.
And how many dentists you have?
Oh, it's a few thousand now. I think it's like between 2,000 and 2,500.
And does it have to be United States? We got listeners in 150 countries.
Yeah, unfortunately, and they're working on that right now. Since they had because one of the things that has to happen, there has to be a lot of protection for the doctor, meaning that we have to make sure that when Charlie and the team sets up all the accounts, you're not actually lending money, you're lending time, right? So it's a lot of things that have to be orchestrated. So right now in all 50 states, and they're starting to roll out the other countries now. But it's been wild to watch.
Well, I want to go back to another question. So when I got out of school, average overhead was about 50% 30 years ago, and you sent your insurance just paid 1% of your fee, indemnity insurance. Now, 82% of dentists take PPOs, and the average fee is about a 40% reduction. And so a lot of dentists, if you go to an accounting statement and say, what is your overhead? They'll say, okay, well, the overhead is, the number one expense is labor, 28%. And it's like, actually, not really. Your number one expense doesn't even show up on a P&L. It's a collected adjusted production. You're adjusting off 40% of your entire practice on these PPO fee schedules. When people are calling you, how big of a problem is PPOs, or is that not really a problem?
If you remember, back in 2008, everybody wanted to go fee for service. How do we get there? How do we get there? How do we get there? And of course, when everything changed, it wasn't uncommon for folks to be on more PPOs or specifically on some fee schedules that were certainly not in their best interest. When folks call us, none of the recommendations that we make, PPOs or not, precludes them from any level of success. What we want to look at, and we literally have people who will call us up, and I think they just want us to tell them to drop all the PPOs, which we're never going to do. Because as you just mentioned, what is that if not just your marketing budget, right? That's what you're paying to attract patients, and that's the hit you're going to take. So if that's true, and if that's how I'm going to look at it, then I'm going to figure out what you're spending now, how I can offset that and attract the same amount of patients who are at least as valuable, if not more, for the same amount of money or less. So I need to create a path to say, we call it a critical path, to where, okay, so I need to increase new patients. I need to increase my case acceptance to here, then I can drop this one. Then I move the dial a little more, now I can drop this one. And we're going to get them as close to keeping as much of their money as possible. Because those are, as you said, it's that invisible check that you write all the time. And some places it's a very literal check. So we want to bleed them off to the point where it's most realistic. Now, since the PDA, one of the cornerstones that we talk about is production per hour, to the point where we schedule to production rather than time, the guys who are on a tremendous amount of PPOs, they're going to have to do more dentistry to hit some of those really high numbers, and that's okay. Most of the folks who call us they're happy to be busier for a while, but that's never our plan. We need to find that balance. My number one goal is to slow the practice down while increasing production, which sounds ridiculous, but it's the only way to do it. When you watch Bruce producing 3,800 an hour, people think it's going to be just chaos. And it's absolutely not. Not one moment in the day is that man rushed. He sits there developing relationships with his patients and doing A-plus clinical dentistry all day long, no exceptions.
So let's go through a typical case for what you're hearing and doing for those three groups, the young and the hungry. Mm-hmm. What is that office usually? What are they calling about? What's their problem? What do you do?
Yeah, so there's two camps. When folks who call us up, it's usually within that, hopefully they call us in year 1, year 2. But usually then they don't even know what their problems are. Because if somebody calls me up and they say, hey, I want help negotiating my lease, or I want to source the cheapest gloves, or they want to do that kind of stuff, I'm going to send them to Scott Luna. I'm going to say, go down and see Scott. He is going to save you so much money. Take one of his courses as soon as you can. I go, that's really not the business that we're in. I go, typically, because that's just, I've never seen anybody make those triple-digit gains finding cheaper gloves. It just doesn't work like that. So the national average for production for a GP is right around $375 an hour. So these younger folks who are coming in.
What would that be for a day, month, year?
Oh, so we can run all that up. If most of these guys are doing 30, 40 a month, they're pretty, they're doing okay. If they start to hit 60, that's usually what hit their stride and start to call us. Typically, we want them between.
Is that $375 an hour the whole office or just the dentist?
Just the doctor's production, not including hygiene.
Okay, so then what is the average What is the average dental office producing, collecting, and netting a year?
So, kind of following that math, so about 600,000 is usually kind of what that's going to wind up being.
600,000 and netting what?
About netting 600. So then depending on what they're doing, they could be producing, especially you see a lot of the production numbers, some of those shouldn't say lower end guys, folks who are just starting off, we might see Medicare, Medicaid offices where you see tremendous production, but then at the end of the day, they're all netting about 600, 550, 500.
They're netting, you mean their take home income, they're netting 600,000 a year?
Not the doctor, the office, yeah.
Are you talking about a one doctor office?
Yes.
So then that one doctor would be netting, you're saying that one doctor's netting 600?
Yes, there you go. We're on the same page.
That's the people calling you?
In that category, yeah.
Yeah, see, and that's my point that I just want to beat home to my homies listening is that, the average dentist in the United States of America nets $174 a year. $174,000 a year. When you talk to consultants, you hear these crazy things like, oh yeah, the average guy's netting 500, 600. Ding, 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 ding. The people that use consultants are making a ton of money. And all the ones not making any money have some addiction to shiny objects, and they buy lasers and CAD cams, and they fly to Dominican Republic to learn how to place implants and bone grafting. And at the end of the day, they don't have any money. I mean, getting your house in order with a consultant is always the best return on investment. I don't know anybody that's doing $2, $3, $4 million a year production and taking home $650, $700, $800 that hasn't used 5 consultants in the last 20 years.
Yeah, Bruce has used 9.
Yeah, I mean, I've used so many. I mean, how would you not learn something from someone who makes a living consulting hundreds of dental offices around the United States?
And part of it, what we found too, since we were predominantly a seminar company for so long, it wasn't until we figured out that about 64% of the dental population will never leave their state for continuing education under any circumstances that we were like, well, we got to change the model or we're just not going to reach everybody. I go down now sometimes to the Lynette meetings down in Cerritos, California, and I'll walk in that room. In fact, last time I was down there, out of maybe 15 docs that were in there getting some training done, 5 of them were sitting in my lecture at Townie on Saturday earlier this year. And I'm like, how's that possible? How is that possible? It is the same 5% of dentists that are rolling around at every convention. We all know each other. We've known each other for a long time. I'm like, where is everybody else? Because I love to help the superstars. I really do. Like, there is nothing more fun than watching somebody crank at $2,500 an hour, $3,000 an hour. And I really, really love that. But this profession isn't going to do what it can do if the rest of the folks either have their head in the sand or they're just too afraid to call. Because I think that's a big problem, is either they've been burnt in the past. They think that not in my town, not where I live, not with my PPOs, not with my team is a big one. And they kind of rule themselves out of the type of people who look for this. And we're so aware of it that Right now, we're looking at different models because the folks that need us most are the least likely to be able to afford it. And that's how they do it, because so many groups kind of take this write me a check and trust me sort of mentality. And if it works, great. But if not, you're burned. So we don't do that. Like, everything that we do is month to month. And our expectation, and I can tell you, we've actually just recently run these numbers. If you look at, you give me anybody in this country for the most part, who has a decent service mix, who can turn a burr, can communicate decently. And what I mean by decently is, you taught me years ago, Howard, if somebody immigrates to this country, there's a 25% chance they'll start their own business. You taught me that. So a lot of folks that you wouldn't even believe how successful they are, English is their second, maybe third language. And those folks can do it because they picked up the phone. So what I can tell you is, year one, the average increase for a PDA client is about $187 an hour. Year two, it goes up about another 80. Year three, it goes up another 60. By month, and all in, and the reason you see that bell curve is, most people, and especially these younger guys, going back to that, if they're cranking at $375 an hour when we meet them, and all of a sudden we bring them up to $500, $600, that's where they want to be. Most of those young guys are not ready for $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. They find this kind of happy place. Their income's what they want it to be. They're paying down their debt at a great rate, and that's usually kind of why it goes up and then kind of just hammers down. But at $185 an hour, we're talking $270,000 a year plus, depending on hours that are worked. So across those 3 years, the average increase is about $350, just call it there. And that's usually what we see. The only exception to that is associates. And associates usually come in 10 to 15% under that, which shouldn't surprise anyone. Now, those are the young guys. So the young guys who are doing startups, just de novos, they're coming out of nowhere, they got to build their own thing. That's kind of their pattern. But actually, the hardest office to coach is the guys who bought in to a practice that might have been a little too large for them to start off on. Those guys, the money means nothing. These are the guys that sit in their car in the morning and have to pump themselves up to drive to the office where the tail's wagging the dog. They inherited a team that's been there for 20, 25 years. They're not listening to a thing that he says or she says or whatever it may be, and they need to get their house in order. And I can name the first year guys that is so common, it would blow your mind. Like, we had a gentleman 2 meetings ago who I was talking about his financial goals, and he said, to be quite honest, I'd just as soon burn the building down. And he was dead serious. And that's the stuff that haunts me. After you go through everything to become a dentist, and then 2 years into it, that's how you feel. And it's like, no, how did it get to this point? So we got to kind of break the mold, rip it down, build it back up, and so on. But the second group of folks who've been doing this 10, 15 years, I'm going to say in there, those are the folks who I wish would call more, because I know statistically there's so many of them that they're doing, by all accounts, they're doing well. They're paying their mortgage. Are they killing it? No. Do they want to be superstars? No. But what if I just increased your practice by $50 an hour? That's it. That's all I did for you, which on average we do by month 2, by the way. Like, that's $70,000 a year. You're going to tell me an extra $70,000 is not going to give you a cushion, is not going to help, with some kind of stress reduction in the office, hire somebody. And it's not difficult to do. It's small adjustments, but they just don't call. And usually they'll call me and they'll say, I've been kind of flat for a while. And I happen to be one of my best friends in life works for Dick Schultz, the founder of Best. Great guy. He's a really interesting guy to listen to. And one of the things he taught me early on, that if you're not growing, you're dying, because nothing around you is getting cheaper.
He's the founder of what?
Of Best Buy.
Are you friends with that guy?
Yeah, so a buddy of mine just started working for him about 10 years ago. And so we fly back to Minneapolis because he's got excellent seats to all the Vikings games and whatnot. So Dick's, he's a wonderfully generous man. So when we'd go out to pick up the tickets and whatnot, usually he'll humor us and kind of sit and chat and shoot the breeze a little bit. And
you think he'd ever do a podcast and talk to dentists?
He might. He very well might.
Will you ask him?
I certainly will. Let me make a little note here.
Oh my God, that would be so amazing. Take a Fortune 500 legend like that guy and have him talk to dentist. Well,
and it's the turnaround story. Of course, I know you've been following your link on Patterson and, of course, what's happened to their stock today. But when all the big box...
What happened to their stock today?
20% drop off. So it fell 20% today. It was down 14% in pre-trading, and then continued down from there. Now it's leveled off a little bit.
And what do you attribute the drop to?
Most people think that it's linked to them losing their exclusivity with Sirona and with their CEREC niche. Now,
is that they had confirmed?
Word around the campfires. That's the way that it's going. So We'll see. I've got a couple analysts that are still looking at it. A lot of the analysts are still long the position, and which isn't that uncommon. I actually took a course through Stanford earlier this spring, and the gentleman who teaches it is a Harvard MBA, teaches for Stanford and runs the Jupiter Capital Group. And 2 of our classes we spent evaluating Shine, and there's a lot of people looking at dental as they have been for years in terms of kind of what's going to happen. But so they were very tickled to have even somewhat of an insider for them to bounce their ideas off of. But with Best Buy, I think the thing that was most remarkable about that company was the turnaround. When all the big box stores and all those things started really just closing up shop, everyone thought Best Buy was next. And of course, they actually pushed Dick out of his own company, and the company, the bottom line reflected that. So he actually came back in, bought back most of the company himself, and they just released their earnings 2-3 days ago, and they're crushing it. I think they're up 10 points in 3 days.
Wow.
So yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm really into, because then especially for dental owners, a lot of these guys have just stuck a fork in it and said, I guess this is who I am. I guess this is my community, and this is the best you get. Patently false. Our number one client, meaning the highest producing client that we have, is in the poorest town in the poorest county in the poorest state in the country, Port Talis, New Mexico. This guy's doing $200,000 a month by himself. Average new patient driving 75 and 100 miles to come and see him. Believe me. Southern California, they got it bad. Dentists on top of dentists, super high competition. You got to stand out in the crowd. There's a lot of methodologies behind that, but anyway, you can't come into this whole thing with those preconceived notions. When I lecture, I actually put up a picture of Derek Jeter. And it's not because I'm a big baseball fan, but I have everyone raise their hands. Who is this guy? They're like, oh, it's Derek Jeter. And I go, for those of you who don't know, Derek Jeter played shortstop for the New York Yankees. Shortstop in baseball is a very, very high pressure position. And the reason I bring him up in these lectures is I was watching an interview with him on ESPN right before he broke one of his records. And he made a very interesting distinction. He made a distinction between playing for the Yankees and the day he became a professional baseball player, because those 2 dates were not the same. And the interviewer said, well, what do you mean that's not the day you became a professional baseball player? He said, when I started playing for the Yankees, every single time that a batter would get up to plate, I would pray that they don't hit the ball to me. Please don't hit the ball to me, because he didn't want to make a mistake. He didn't want to let down his team. He said the day he became a professional baseball player was the day he wanted every single ball hit to him, because he was the guy to do it. That's why he was on the team. And so I tell this story to establish a mindset. Bruce does not fear any competition. And in his town of 6,000 people, there are 31 other dentists, and they're moving in more and more all the time.
In a town of 6,000?
In a town of 6,000. Google it. In fact, you know what blows people's minds? We actually coach and do marketing for another office in Granbury. How about that? He's just completely fearless, because he knows he's that Derek Jeter, and he markets the heck out of his area, because he knows in his heart of hearts that the people in his community and anybody with a car deserves the type of dentistry that he's providing. So I will get a little bit rowdy with the rooms, as I did in Vegas the last time. And I said, if you don't believe that in your heart, then move over, because somebody who does believe that's going to call me, and we're going to team up to crush you. And I'm unapologetic about that, because I want those people to want it. You have to believe that first. If you don't believe either your clinical dentistry, your leadership, or whatever is in a position to where you should even be successful, then let's work on that. It's funny. Nothing in dentistry is cheap, right? And I always try to illuminate some of the opportunities that people have kind of in front of them at all times. And I always ask people like Howard, you've played Monopoly before, right? Mm-hmm. What happens when you pass go?
When you pass go, get $200.
Get $200. Why do you get $200? Nobody ever knows. The reason you get $200, and when you go home, and people listening, everyone's got a Monopoly board at home. I want you to pull this up or Google it or whatever. Printed right there in that square, your entire life, in parentheses, it says you get $200 because that's your salary. So then what I ask people is, have you ever met anyone in the history of time who's ever won the game of Monopoly simply by passing go? And the answer is no. It's 100% impossible to do so. So what is that game? What is Monopoly? It's a real estate investment game. right? So break it down further, it's simply a game of investments. And naturally, I took this story from my father in wealth management. But when I look at these practices and I hear all the excuses, the my towns, the this, the that, I ask them, I go, what did you invest in? What was your return? Like, what did you even try to do to develop your practice? And most of them, the answer is very little outside of buying technology and crossing their fingers, which just doesn't work. And I'm like, usually they'll look around at whoever's got the full parking lot in town and they'll trash them. They'll be like, oh, I'll hear it all the time. Oh, they got this big gaudy Taj Mahal practice, and I see their marketing everywhere. And I'm like, well, you know what? They're crying all the way to the bank. You know what I mean? Either get in the fight or get out. You know, it's one of those deals, and you don't have to do that to be successful. But again, you know, it's the people who are there, the people who show up.
So I want to go back to the groups, the young and the hungry. A lot of these people buy an office. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know the metrics. They bought an office. It was for $650, $750. Turns out the dentist been given all of his staff $1 raise every time the earth went around the sun. And they're in there. And the doctor started out with indemnity insurance and now is on PPOs. And they're inheriting a bunch of staff that's been there 20, 30 years, and their labor is 40%. Mm-hmm. What do you do in that situation?
Well, a lot of it, and it's never fun. And it's usually one of those things like teams sometimes get nervous when groups like ours come in that we're going to run in here and we're just going to start swinging the axe. And typically that's not all that common. I tell you, and this is something that just breaks my heart every time, typically whoever's kicking and screaming the hardest when we come in is either the highest paid or they're stealing from the office. You'd be amazed.
How often do you find stealing?
I would say of the people who've had episodes of stealing on any level, probably 90%. We're talking from either they're stealing whitening or they're doing something to that effect, all the way up from a couple of 100,000 that we found last year in an office. Sometimes just doing the homework alone, we'll find inconsistencies and somebody's stealing. And because there's no checks and balances, and it's one of the first things that we start on.
How are they usually stealing?
Oh, a variety of different ways. Typically, they're having checks rerouted. They're in the big case that I just told you about, where it was over 200,000. They were shorting vendors. So not only did we catch this person who had put themselves in a situation they couldn't possibly get themselves out of, not only was the money gone, but the money was still owed to all of these people that they were shorting. Changing addresses on checks coming in from insurance companies. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. Paying phantom vendors, setting phantom vendors up in your system, auto bill paying things that don't exist. We've seen just about everything. So we have a gal here in the office, Carrie now, and we're shifting her role because she's so good. One of her backgrounds is forensic accounting, so putting up some of these safeguards in offices is becoming, it's important. And it's funny, and the amazing thing, I know we've got different temperaments than maybe most, Howard, but you steal $200,000 from me, I put you in the ground, right? Like most of these docs don't do anything. They don't want to deal with it. They never call the police. Rarely, they never get the money back, but they just want it to go away because they're embarrassed primarily. So sometimes it's our job to come in and we'll be the bad guy. We'll do that and we'll run that through if that's what they want.
It's amazing. I've known a lot of consultants in the last 29 years, and the average consultant tells me when they walk into an office, it's 50% of the time. 1 out of every 2 offices they go in there, the doctors complain about, I'm working hard, but I'm not making any money. And 1 out of 2 times. And some of it, I mean, it's so many ways. One guy, his wife had decided she was going to divorce him, but she thought before she would divorce him, she was the office manager. She would start sending money into a bank account out of the country. In this case, it was Sydney, Australia. And so she just hated him, but she stayed in there because she was stealing like $10,000 a month.
Oh, yeah.
Just racked up, a gazillion dollars. And then when he found out, he said, oh, well, now you caught me. So here, we're getting divorced.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, it's everything.
Yeah. So when we come in, and usually when you have the staff that they know they're at a position in terms of whatever their pay scale may be. So a lot of it, we take one of 2 routes. Either one, usually with the writing on the wall, we'll figure out a place for them to go. Typically those folks quit. Versus us having to fire them through a variety of mechanisms that we put into place. Otherwise, it just becomes a reality conversation where most dentists have a hard time with transparency because they're afraid that if the team knows certain things, they're going to do I don't know what with the information. But most teams handle it pretty well when you put it in the right context. So when we walk through like every dollar that comes into practice and where it all winds up, and we just have them say, this guy took all the risk. Like, what do you believe they deserve as the owner? Maybe a quarter and a dime, kind of a thing out of every dollar. But when they walk back through it, they start to see how that whole thing functions. And you've always made that distinction of kind of basing people's pay scale off of astrology. And a lot of when I go in and I'll talk to maybe assistants or whatever it is, and I'll ask the question, what are you doing to set the doctor up for success? And usually what they list are functions of the job. What I mean by that is, I'm always on time. I set up the room right, everything's clean, everything's ready to go. Well, yeah, that's a function of the job. That means you get to keep your job. What are you doing to make sure that the office and the doctor are being more successful? And they don't always understand what I mean. And it's a lot of really simple tactics. When you go down to Bruce's office for the over-the-shoulder courses, what you see is a lot of what I call two-step thinking. Everything in the dental office is cyclical for the most part. So you can see around the curve when it comes to communication, when it comes to what's going to be needed clinically and whatnot. And Bruce's team they're masters. So they're seeing 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. And that's why they're able to produce where they can. And in fact, in his office, when they need a new assistant, the assistants hire the new assistant. The new assistants train the new assistants, and the new assistants fire the new assistants. I mean, they have that much protection over the efficiency in their office. Will everyone reach that? Probably not, but if we can get anywhere close to it, it's a night and day difference in terms of the stress level of the doctor alone. So that delegation portion, that training portion it can't be underestimated. In fact, when doctors call me, like, who should I bring to the seminar? I go, your assistant. And they go, not the office manager, not the front desk, not this person. I go, nope. I go, my number one goal for you is for your day to feel different. And my best methodology for doing that is to retrain your assistant, get him doing more and learning how to truly support you in all that you do. Makes the biggest difference immediately.
So, gosh, I can't believe it's been out. You got to go. It's been an hour.
I got nothing but time for you, Howard.
Really? Gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about. I want to go to number 2 on that second group. You said they've been there 10 to 15 years. They got burnout. Yeah. Burnout's a huge problem.
Yep.
What's your diagnosis and treatment plan of burnout?
So, and again, part of it has to do with the cyclical nature of dentistry, meaning that over time, we call it a one-act play. And to where in the one-act play, when they sit down, whether it's a new patient exam, whatever it is, most dentists kind of have a certain rhythm. And you do that over enough times, you stop feeling rewarded. In behavioral economics, we call it a decrease in marginal utility. An example of this in a kind of layman's terms is that imagine you had a sweet tooth. You got a bowl of candy in front of you. You say, oh, candy. You take the first piece. Oh, man, it's great. It's sweet. It's delicious. It's what you want. And then if I said, all right, take another piece. And then 2 minutes later, take another piece. Now take another piece. The actual value, the sweetness, the value itself of the candy hasn't diminished, but my enjoyment of the candy decreases over time. It's called a decrease in marginal utility. So the things when these guys had been doing for the first 10 years, if they nail their crown prep, they snap in that whatever that is, prosthetic, everything just works. The satisfaction from those events decreases. And usually at a rate between every 5 to 7 years I can find. And that's when they're either going to decide they're going to open up a Taco Bueno or a bar or a restaurant or whatever it is and try to make more money than they're doing in dentistry. And it never works out because it just comes from the satisfaction in terms of doing what they're doing. And that's where we got to switch it up. Now, I use the term Sunday matinee. When I grew up, I originally went to college on a music and theater scholarship, believe it or not, in a former life. But we had tickets to the theater, and it was a Sunday matinee. We'd all come back from college, grad school, the family, and we'd see a show. We did that for 15 years. And I can't tell you not one time on a matinee, which if you know anything about theater, that tends to be the throwaway show. Friday night's the big one, Saturday night's the big one, Sunday matinee's the throwaway show. A lot of understudies and whatnot. But I can't remember one time that somebody phoned it in, that didn't sing their lungs out, dance their legs off or whatever it was, because I bought the same ticket as the guy on Friday. What tends to happen is we lose that satisfaction. We get it, like the Billy Joel will talk about, he's played Piano Man so many times, like he doesn't even remember doing it anymore. He's thinking about so many other things. And that's what happens to dentistry. We just disconnect. So there's no satisfaction there. So they start to seek it. That's how they get burnt out. They just get tired of solving the same problems over and over. So what we have to do, we have to get backups on backups on backups when it comes to the communication, when it comes to the things that they don't even see anymore. And that's a big part of what I was talking about with the team. So I look for examples of perfect redundancy in business. And I think it was John Coyce who actually taught me this the first time, where he said that the closest example to perfection in the modern industrial era that we have is actually the airline industry. Not the stuff on the ground, but the stuff in the sky. Because if they even had a 1% failure rate, it would be 2 crashes at every major airport every single day. And of course, we're nowhere near that, which begs the question, how are they so good? And it's redundancy. It's backups on backups on backups. And most dentists that I know, nobody's backing them up. Nobody's backing them up when it comes to the communication. No one's backing them up when it comes to the case presentation, certain things. So what we do, going back to this one-act play, is we build a system around it. We base it off risk factors, just like John Coyce does. So when they drop the ball, when their head's out of the game, that assistant swoops right in and says, "Doctor, what do you think about this risk factor?" All of a sudden, when the doctor's just losing concentration, whatever it is, they're doing something automatically now, that assistant, they can spot it. They're going to go in and say, "Doctor, that is beautiful. That is gorgeous. Well done." Because the patient, what we call the assumption of aptitude, can take absolutely no joy in anything that you're doing clinically. They can't see it. They can only enjoy the obvious aesthetic outcome or the fact that they're no longer in pain. So the big job of the assistants is to be the eyes for the patients on the other side of things. Little simple tactics that we do all the time. So again, that's a really long explanation, but we got to relight that fire. We got to find something else for these guys to do. And it's amazing where sort of their clinical acumen, what they want to spend their time doing over time, gets less and less and less. There's certain things that just fall off. I'm sure you know Dr. Kent Smith down in Irving. He's a lecturer on sleep apnea, a bunch of stuff, 6 Month Smiles over time. I saw him in Boca recently, and he's down to just doing sleep apnea and 6 Month Smiles. That's all he does. That's all he wants to do, and has an amazingly successful practice. So a lot of times when I'm talking to a dentist, I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do? Like, well, how do you want to spend your time? And let's design the practice around that." Because they think all this other baggage is just mandatory. Just the nature of doing the business. It's just not true.
I know a lot of dentists migrate over the years when they burn out from fillings and cleanings and single unit crowns. They either go down blood and guts and get into implants and bone grafting, or they say, "I don't like blood and guts," and they go into all the non-dental stuff like orthodontics, Invisalign, sleep apnea, snore guards, TMD, all this stuff. Yeah. I want to ask you another question. Big toys. A lot of people are driving to work right now and they're really stressing out. Should they buy a $150,000 CEREC machine? Or you talked about lecturing at the LANAP. That's $135,000. If the goal is I got $350,000 in student loans and I want to pay them off and have $350,000 in the bank, what do you say about the high price CERECs? The LANAP
well, typically CEREC's a little bit easier, just looking at kind of what's going out the door to the lab. Can we get as close to what, Mark Moore and those guys used to say back in the day, where it's a free tool and all that, which the reality of that was never exactly there. LANAP's a little bit harder in terms of if you're going to pull the trigger on that piece of equipment, like, you better have a plan. You better have a plan to get that thing moving. But CEREC, I'm a big fan. For all the obvious
but I mean,
reasons.
When Bruce is doing $3,500 an hour, is he milling out all them crowns and sanding and glazing them and doing all that himself?
Yeah, so what he did, no. So he used to. And of course, back when the technology was a little bit yet less user-friendly, you're doing line drawings, you're doing all this kind of stuff, the learning curve was a little bit steeper than it is now. So Bruce realized, again, through the financing options, that he basically wanted to be able to have people walk away with same-day smiles. That was always his vision. He was waiting for the day the technology caught up aesthetically to be able to reasonably do so. He meets a guy in California by the name of Eddie Corrales. And Eddie Corrales is just simply an absolute master when it comes to CAD/CAM technologies of all form. So he'd fly Eddie out. They'd have somebody come in doing 10 crowns, get him, do it all in one day, and out the door they go, massive cases, aesthetically beautiful, and so on. Then one day, Tamara in his office says, "You know what? I think I can do that." He goes, "And if you invest in me, I'll prove it." So we have a rule at PDA. You never delegate to somebody unless they can do it as good or better than whomever they're taking the function away from. And she did. She poured herself into it, and now Tamara designs everything. Does Dr. Baird still do it every now and again because he enjoys it? Yeah, but Tamara's amazing.
So you would recommend CEREC then?
I would, but here's the big caveat. People underutilize and they underexplain the technology, right? We've heard, same-day smiles, that's an obvious one. We had a guy, this is a kind of a marketing tip, if you will, a gentleman who was practicing in Aspen, and if you really looked around, his main competition wasn't other dentists. It's actually plastic surgery. Because when people had discretionary dollars they wanted to spend to improve their self-image, it was either they're going to do something under the knife or they're going to come over here with him. So because he really wanted to be a destination dentistry guy, he really wanted to do, the real big cases still. And so I came up with this idea because he was a CEREC guy. I said, nobody really knows. Consumers still don't really know what that is. And of course, they put all the lights in there and they make it like as exciting as possible. But still, most people don't know. So what we did is we got a billboard. And we put the CEREC machine up on a billboard. And literally it just said, come ask me about my time machine. Nothing will make you look 20 years younger in one day, guaranteed. That got attention because everyone wants to look 20 years younger and you do it in a day. Okay. Space age looking thing up there, home run.
Okay, well, you've been so generous with your time. You're 10 minutes over. Let's switch over now to a whole different topic. You said the fastest growing part of your business was the marketing.
Yeah.
And one thing that I never understood is if you ask a dentist, you said early to spend 5 to 8% in collection on marketing. Mm-hmm. You say that to 100 dentists, and 9 out of 10 will say, "No way, that's crazy." But then you hand that same dentist a contract and say, "Hey, will you do this PPO for 40% off all your prices?"
Exactly. It's like you're paying for it now.
So why do they never blink as signing up for? I call PPOs a volume discount. I mean, you sign up for a PPO because you're going to get 100 patients. Okay, well, if you're going to get 100 patients, they're going to get a discount. I mean, obviously, if I buy one Barbie doll, it'll be $10. But if Walmart buys 1,000,000 Barbie dolls, I'm sure they ain't paying 10 or 9 or 8 or 7. So why do my homies not blink as signing for a 40% off HMO for PPO for a volume discount? But then when you come along and Chris Moriarty says, "Hey, I want you to spend 5 to 8% on advertising," they go like, "Are you on drugs?" Mm-hmm. So talk about that. So what kind of marketing are you doing? And by the way, before I forget, my column this month on Dental Town was, "What does your website say about you?" I read that. Mm-hmm. But I wish you'd comment after that.
I will. I'll share because it's a big.
You could rant on so much. You could actually post a comment on that article online that's longer than my article because you know so much about marketing. And I wish you would because
I should send you. I get published about once a week with just a bunch of easy stuff that I have that it can be pretty impactful. But when it comes to marketing, there's usually a litmus test that I'll run to help kind of open people's eyes because again, one of the big reasons that people stay away from it is the connotation to just the term marketing. It's kind of almost this dirty word because what they do is they think of examples of bad marketing. They think that we're going to start couponing, that we're going to diminish the value of something they spent their life perfecting. Where it comes to the PPOs, it's standard practice. You can tell your friends that on the golf course, "Oh man, I'm getting burned by this PPO." Or if you tell the other story, "I went with this company and they're burning me." For some reason, like we're okay with one person ripping you off and not the other, but that's a different story. So what I'll tell them is I'll have people raise their hands. On the Saturday portion of the PDA workshops, that's my time. So I'll get up there and I'll say, raise your hands if you've ever owned a BMW. And then we get some hands. Now raise your hands if you've ever owned a Kia. And we get some hands. Now I go, I want a third group. I want you to raise your hands if you've ever owned a BMW and a Kia. And of course, nobody, ever. And I go, now here's what I want you to do. Everyone grab a pen. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and I want you to write 10 differences between BMWs and Kias. Ready, go. And of course, everyone starts jotting down feverishly. And I go, okay, so now riddle me this. How is it that no single person in this room has owned both a Kia and a BMW, but every single person here is able to tell me the difference between the two? And not just one thing, 10 things. Everyone was able to do it. How? And of course, the answer is each one of those companies spends millions of dollars a year to make sure we know the difference. Right? And so I hammered home, and if for the folks who are in the lecture at Townie, I have an expression that is, I don't care if you're Nordstrom's, and I don't care if you're Walmart, because they both make billions. What we want is, number one, authenticity. We want to tell your story, and what I can't stand is the regurgitation of efforts that we see in the dental sphere, where they look at, again, whoever's parking lot is full. Where are they spending their money? What are they doing? Oh, I should do that too. So everything looks alarmingly the same. So you just get this diluted, vanillized effort that goes around where you might as well just be marketing for dentistry in general. So we walk through some pretty specific exercises to figure out, again, what am I trying to drive? And here's a simple rule. We call it layering. A more simple explanation would be hunting versus fishing. If you think of your practice, think of the immediate drive time area, whatever, 15, 20 minutes. all the marketing within that sphere should generally be culture-based. Right? So this is going to be here's who we are to this community. We're seeing the children of children of children, of whatever that story may be. Nobody takes better care of you than we do. But that's really where that stops. Because as these concentric circles get wider, what you'll find is that your offering has to narrow, and there needs to be more information behind it. Because believe me, when it comes to Bruce's office, nobody's driving 100 miles to get their teeth cleaned. They're driving 100 miles because he's the guy to see for X, Y, and Z. Whatever it may be. So when I have to push these docs, I go again, we want to make sure, because we had a gentleman yesterday who happens to live in an affluent area. His average, the average billing, per visit is about $300. And he goes, well, most of my patients are super regular with recare, and there's just not a lot of work to do with them. I mean, hygiene does their job. I can't pull a lot from that. And I said, well, then we need to find people who need what you do. That means we got to reach out further. We got to pick some things, and you got to be the guy that people will drive 100 miles to come and see. So we do this over and over again. And again, whether it's Portales, New Mexico, Crossville, Tennessee, Granbury, Texas, don't give me the geography explanation. We have people that'll call from coal towns where unemployment's 80%. Well, either number one, move, or number two, get your wallet out. We had a guy he's in Gooseville, South Carolina, calls me up, and this is literally the conversation we have. He says, I need to be at 3 million this time next year. And I said, okay. Knew the guy, he'd come through a seminar previously. And I said, well, where are you now? And he said, 1.2. I go, okay. So my question was, what are you willing to do? And he said, whatever it takes. And Howard, both you and I know that people love to say that. Rarely do they mean it. But this guy 100% did. He meant it through and through. So we put together the big plan, and I'm going to tell you about this plan here in a second. He hired a marketing coach. Her name's Jenny Bowman that works for us. She handled the whole thing. And guy hit his mark. He didn't question a single thing, because we get that all the time. People will call us up, hey, I'm thinking about doing pay-per-click. I'm thinking about doing that. So we give you our opinion. We do the research, and they'll go, oh, you know what? I think I'm just going to do billboards. It's like, well, why did you call? Why did you ask me? I'm like, this is what we do. If I sat in your chair and you said you needed a root canal, I said, oh, no, just throw a veneer on it. You'd be like, well, no. Why did you come and ask me what I think? So what we do, knowing full well that the vast majority of the people listening are not spending anywhere near 5 to 8%, we have to start with where you are. What I call is, let's start with a little R&R. Because if your budget is zero, and we have budgets as high as $50,000 a month, just people on retainers, we just do whatever they need us to do. But most people, they're not there. And I don't even know want to be there. But if your budget is zero, then I got two things that I got to do to move the dial. Number one is reactivation, and number two is referrals. I can double anyone's internal referrals within 2 to 3 months, 90% of the time. So if you're at 5, I'm going to bring you to 10. If you're at 20, I'm going to bring you to 40, but we're going to use those funds. We're going to allocate those funds and that growth into some of the other things that might take a little bit longer, might be a little bit more nuanced. And don't get me going on reactivation. I could talk about that all day long in terms of the pitfalls and how I just see it being done in such a miserable fashion everywhere that I go, overused and just done poorly. The finger wagging letter, I call it, never works.
What does work in reactivation?
So I'll send you a letter that I wrote for.
Post it on my column this month.
Oh, sure, there you go.
Because every when the sky's falling, most dentists, the first drug they want to inject is a big old syringe of new patients. Mm-hmm. And right now, the old guys, we grew up on word of mouth or direct mail or yellow pages, and now all these townies think it's all going to come through digital, and that means the foundation of your digital is your website. And there's so much interest in their website. So when you're on that, when you're replying on that column, when you're looking at what does your website say about you, keep addressing. They just want more new patients. Most every dentist I talked to said, you know what, I could solve all my problems if I got 10 more new patients a month.
Yeah, and I understand.
Why did you grin? Because do you think
so? I always laugh.
It's not true, or why did you laugh?
Because the answer is never more. Everyone gets into their heads that they need more new patients or more technology or a more or better team or a better, they always think that it's more. Where typically we walk through, and I always tell them, number one, if you had 1,000 new patients show up tomorrow anyway, could you even take care of them? And for the most part, you're still doing it a tooth at a time. Like, that's not how you do it. Again, there was a gentleman yesterday. The first thing I look at is the correlation between visits and production. Is the only way your production goes up is if you have more visits? Well, that's just going to make you busy. Again, as Gordon Christensen told us recently, that in these days, 9 out of 10 crowns are done one at a time. And I have no interest in playing that game. I'd much rather work with you on the folks that you do have coming in the door. Because if I want to raise you,
okay, but I know my homies. Oh, yeah. I mean, I've been a dentist 29 years. I've lectured 1,000 times to them. Here's what they're thinking. Okay, everybody wants to say, "Hey, good news." No one wants to come up and say, "Oh, I just saw your cat ran over by a car." And so when they see you talk about behavioral economics. I don't want to tell Chris Moriarity that he has 9 cavities. I don't want to tell him that he needs 6 crowns. What kind of sociopath would you have to be to tell someone everything wrong with their mouth at one time? I mean, a human being would rather tell you it's your birthday than it's your funeral.
Absolutely. So one of the ways that we address this almost first when it comes to just PDA and some of the philosophies that we instill, the first thing that Bruce will say over and over, day one of the seminar, is it's not his problem. So what he does, we took a page right out of John Coyce's playbook. The new patient exam for us consists of these risk factors. Because again, I'm less concerned what's wrong with the mouth. I'm more concerned why is the mouth in this condition. Going back to Kim Cooch, going back to everybody. Because what the patient has to realize that no matter what we do in their mouth in terms of restorations, if they don't change certain things that they have to take ownership of, it's all for naught. Why even do it? It's just going to break down again. So what we try to do is really walk the patient down the path of why you and try to help them understand my job is to simply tell you what I see. And if I do that, and we have some really specific scripting to that, and I underestimated that when I started off working with dentists, that so many of them, the highest point of stress in the day is the communication element. If they could just turn a burr with their head down all day long, that's what they would want to do. And they'll ask me, they'll just say, Chris, just tell me exactly what to say. No problem. We can do that. Because people say, well, I don't want to be scripted. Like, why not?
It's what natural selection did to dentistry.
Oh, in so many ways.
I mean, you don't let anybody into dental school unless they get A's in calculus, physics, and geometry. Mm-hmm. Well, those aren't going to be your well-rounded fraternity kids who were in a sorority and were Miss Popularity and sat at the fun table. That's always going to be that's always going to be the engineer accountant that sat in the back corner of the library and faced the corner.
Exactly. So and so knowing that, we had to take that stress away. I still remember that
corner.
Still got your name scrawled in the wall.
Yeah.
So we want to take that stress away from him and say, you know what? Again, this is a one-act play. And every time you go in this room, in fact, I do a little kind of an association game where I have them write these 5 animals down, then I have them rank them, and it's tiger, sheep, horse, pig, and so on. And again, just stuff from grad school, little games that we would play. And really, the only 2 I'm looking for are who ranks tiger number 1 and who ranks pig as number 1. Tiger's always number 1 across the board. And of course, that's the number 1 association with pride. Pride is one of the biggest pitfalls of dentistry because of the fact that it takes so much time and attention to do dentistry well that when a patient says no to a treatment plan, for whatever the amount is, but they've got $2,000 worth of tattoos on their arm, they've got $300 jeans on, and a crystal blue Mercedes in the parking lot, and you get viscerally angry because they devalue what your contribution is to their life. And the reason for that, and I explain this to dentistry, is because there's not a lot of social currency involved with dentistry. You can close your mouth, and the problem goes away when you're having social interactions with each other. Like, unless you're doing veneers, like if somebody pulls a rabbit out of a hat and saves a tooth back here, you're not running around a party showing that off, right? So that's what I mean by social currency, whether it's that shirt, it's that thing, whatever they're seeking to gain from the society from which they live, they get that benefit. So we have to play a different game, like when it comes to, and I spend a lot of time on this, especially the mental element. But again, that's the tiger. The second one is pig, and naturally pig is that closest association with money, and it's always the fewest people in the room. And we're the Productive Dentist Academy. That's why they came to us, to make more money, right? No. I mean, a lot of it is just they want to feel rewarded for what they do on a level that's appropriate and kind of equal to the effort that they're putting in. But it's never about the money. And that's what we always say. If you take amazing care of people in a different way, the money will always take care of itself. And so fundamentally, that's where we kind of start and end with that whole thing with these docs. And that's once they feel that again, they feel truly supported by their team, they feel like they're making a difference again, that's worth more than the extra whatever that goes back in their bank account.
when you're doing marketing, last question, when you're doing marketing, are you doing, you mentioned billboards. I would call
Oh,
billboards
sure.
old school. Billboards, yellow pages, direct mail, coupon books versus the new digital age, website,
Yeah.
Google ad, Facebook ad. What is
And
your mix on that?
this is the way I spent a lot of time on this because we've got people in this building, they're just called strategists. That's all they do. So when we get a new coaching client, one of the first things that we do is we build them a 12-month plan and budget. And again, based on their actual numbers, even though I eventually want that 5 to that 8%, I have to start with the reality, which means that if your budget is zero, the strategists need to show us what they're going to do with zero today to build into whatever, month 2, 3, 4 for the next year. And I have to continually remind myself that I am not who I'm trying to attract. What I mean by that, I made a really knee-jerk, poor decision probably 2 years ago now where strategist wasn't at the table. I was going through somebody's Yellow Pages ad. They were spending $1,400 a month, only got 10 patients all year. I reacted and I said, dump it. That's ridiculous. Who are we that we even allowed them to spend that much money over the year with that kind of return? What I didn't do was I didn't go and look at who were those 10 patients. And half of them were, we're talking full arches. They were wonderful cases, the exact kind of stuff we're doing. Because who reads the Yellow Pages? An older demographic. Older demographics have more dental needs. This was me getting in my own way despite my education, right? Direct mail is probably another wonderful example of this because in my household, I can't throw it away fast enough. I probably throw 5, 6 of them away a day, couldn't tell you what one of them says. But I'm not trying to attract me. In fact, the gentleman down in, and I'll weave this all back together, when that gentleman that I told you about in Portales, New Mexico, our number one client, for many years, he is a man's man, by the way. If you meet him, just a rough and tumble dude, great handshake, had the purplest website you had ever seen in your life. We have what's called a color theorist on staff who agonizes over fonts and colors. And I used to think most of that was great science, but not necessarily going to move the dial that much. Who's he trying to attract? He was trying to attract women, like a lot of folks are, from 45 to 65, whose kids have now left the house and now it's mom's turn. It's grandma's turn, and they're going to take care of themselves for once. And man, oh man, they came a-running. You used the right bait to catch the right fish, which sounds a little trite, pejorative, but forgive me. So what I have to do and what I have to remind our clients continually, we have something called a client expectations workbook. I don't care what you're doing with us, I'm going to send you that whole thing. Because if someone's doing direct mail, I'm going to tell you, you don't get to call me for a year. You do not get to pick up the phone 9 months when you've not seen a return and panic at me because I'm telling you right now, and I'm going to send you a document to reflect it that I'm going to refer you to, saying this one's a long burn, right? So the strategists do a very good job of getting us out of our own way. What their job is to say, where should I spend my money and what should I expect? Where's my competition spending their money and how can I bump them off? Like a lot of it is trying to figure out who you are in that community of your competition. And then, as hard as it is for dentists to do, and myself to do, is to follow the plan. The guys who stick to the plan, remember the guy in South Carolina I told you about, just stuck to the plan, crushed his goal. This is what these people do when they do nothing else. Listen to them. Don't sit there and say, billboard, that's ridiculous. I think we should do this. Well, maybe you should do dentistry, and we should drive people to your door. Isn't that what you really want? But I get it because you don't want to throw good money after bad, and there's so many options these days. We just had a client call us up and say, hey, I got this Pandora rep on the phone, and it's $5,000 a month, and they say that they're going to rain patients. And I said, what do the strategists think? And they say the strategists don't want to touch it. He goes, it's unproven. There's not enough data. Not enough people are doing it. Like we can't recommend it. But they were so said, no. We actually had them sign a waiver and saying we are choosing to do this because we want to experiment it. We're going to put it in a column of R&D, and it was a flop, a huge flop. And you know what? I'm not trying to say don't blame us. Now we know. Now we know. And they took ownership of it. They did not complain one bit. They said, hey, we knew it was risky. We knew you didn't back us. That kind of thing. But we can't just rubber stamp things that are untested like that because these are so easy. You mentioned websites. Our average client gets between 3 and 6 phone calls a day from web companies, SEO companies telling the sky is falling, they're everything's wrong, it's all garbage, and they don't know who to listen to. They have no idea who to listen to. So if anybody listening out there is just curious, I do want you to be a client, but ask us. That's why we're here.
How do they ask you?
Advice. So either just shoot me an email, just Chris at productivedentist.com. lot of people, believe it or not, there's a little chat box on the front of our website that goes straight to. You wouldn't believe how many people at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night finally decide they're going to reach out. And they do it in that safe way because they think nobody's going to be there, and they're very surprised when I am. Because I want to talk about this stuff 24 hours a day.
So that's Chris at productivedentist.com. What about a phone number?
Yeah, reach me directly, 612-655-3050. Go through the maze of the automated. You just call me directly.
Yeah, and you can also find him on Dentaltown. I mean, he's got over 200 posts on Dentaltown. His username's C Moriarity for Chris Moriarity. But man, I love all you do. I think you're amazing, and gosh, there's I can't wait to see your remarks on the column on Dentaltown. And you were right about that Patterson drop. That's a non-exclusive. They dropped their exclusive with the Sirac machine.
There you go. Yeah. So it all made sense. But again, Howard,
I want to make one other comment too. You've mentioned John Coyce a couple times, and sure. I'm absolutely in love with John Coyce and Bruce Baird. And I just keep reminding dentists of it. This is not my opinion, but when Harvard Business Review does studies on the top 10% of the executives in the Fortune 500 as of net earnings and profitability versus the bottom 10%, trying to decide what this mythical leader is. I mean, is he some tall, dark, and handsome guy in a red Ferrari and all that stuff? And they're not. They can't associate. Like if I asked you, the fastest growing stock in my lifetime, besides the obvious ones, one of the top 10 in my entire lifetime was Walgreens. Name the CEO of Walgreens.
I couldn't.
See, because he's a short, fat, bald guy with just an operator. But what Harvard Business Review says, the only thing we can find in common with the top 10%, they're all humble. They listen to their employees. They listen to their customers. They listen. And the bottom 10%, they're all arrogant. And if you ever sit by someone on an airplane for an hour flight and lean over to him and say, I just want a list of, give me the top 10 words that come to your mind when describing a dentist. Humble is never in the list. More times than not, it's arrogant, condescending, talks down. And you look at the top guys like John Coyce. That is the most lovable, down-to-earth guy.
Oh,
Bruce Beard, you could show up at his front door dripping wet and say, I'm out of money. Can I spend the night in your house? And it'd be, of course. And then so many dentists, I mean, I don't want to throw my townies under a bus, but so many of these dentists that I meet they're so arrogant and think they're all that. And I always think to myself, why are you so arrogant? I mean, you don't listen to people like in marketing. I remember when the Yellow Page guy used to come around, but way back in '87 when I had my first Yellow Page ad, and he designed my ad, and I said, "Well, so that's the ad," and I said, "Oh, okay," and he goes, He goes, "Okay, what?" And I said, "Well, that's what you recommend, so that's what I'm trying to do." Yeah. And he goes, "Are you kidding me? I've never had a dentist do that. They always think they know everything." And I said, "Well, dude, I studied fillings and crowns for 8 years. This is all you do. How long have you been doing Yellow Page ads?" He goes, "I've been doing it for like 10 years." I says, "Well, how the hell could I backseat drive you?" Yeah. I'm not going to ask you your opinion on a root canal, and I'm sure as hell not going to give you my opinion on a Yellow Page ad. And he goes, and he said to me, "Dentists never listen." And my ad used to crush it. And then I would say, "Well, what are the other dentists doing wrong?" And he'd tell me. Then I'd flip through the book, and that's what everyone else is doing. Because dentists, if you want to be the greatest CEO, I don't care if you own a wheat farm, a dairy farm, or a dental office, or a restaurant, you need to be humble. Listen to your staff. Listen to your customers. Listen when you're getting marketing. You told this guy, "Don't do it. Sign here. We're not recommending that." But he was a damn dentist. I mean, he knows it all. Physicians, dentists, lawyers, goddamn, they're the smartest person in the room. And if you don't believe him, just ask him. Ask any dentist at a party, who is the smartest person in this room? And they'll go, "You mean besides me?" And you might be the smartest person in a filling or a crown or a root canal, but you got to be humble and listen to all the other experts in all the other areas of life.
Absolutely. And I think a big part of it, when you just talked about kind of how patients react and respond to dentistry in general, and this comes from working with physicians for so long, was that when we get sick, it's something that happens to you, right? Whereas if you've got dental needs, it's because of something you didn't do. meaning that it's due to straight either negligence, and if you were brushing your teeth, you didn't know how. And that's why I loved, with John Coyce and Canberra and working for Kim Cooge, that you finally had this explanation of, well, why little Johnny and not little Susie? Why is it that this person stares at a candy bar for 2 seconds, their teeth are falling out of their faces, where I can drink a gallon of Gatorade, not brush my teeth twice a month, and I'm fine? So we had that lack of empathy that just got translated into, well, yeah, that's why and there's so much shame associated with it, you got to get out of it. So we spent a lot of time on that, but it all winds up in this big ball in terms of things that we're just up against daily in this vocation. It just doesn't have to be like that.
And you know what I also want you to do, just for me, for my own selfish reasons? Okay, I'm in Phoenix, and I'm down here in the perfect time of year. I mean, I woke up today, it was 48 degrees. I had to put a jacket. I love the winters. Between Halloween and February, I don't want to go anywhere because I live in the most perfect spot. But in the summer, in June, July, August, when it's 120 degrees and I could cook fried eggs on my own sidewalk, let's do a townie lecture up in your island deal. I just want to vacation there. I just want to go. And I want to take my boys. I want to take Ryan and Greg, and so I want to get away to that. I want to turn my boys on that. I mean, salmon fish, all that stuff.
We'll do it all,
and we'll turn it into a business trip. I'll lecture there. I'll market it on the townies and all that stuff. And I just want to go up there and just.
It's been our dream. We've been putting so much into the infrastructure up here just to make sure we could host an event just like that. In fact, let me sweeten the deal here a little bit. One of the things that we do when docs come up, if you want to have the quintessential Northwest experience, what winds up happening is we're doing our work during the day. In the morning, a few folks go over and we throw the crab pots in off the North Shore at Guimas Island. We do our work. Everyone takes the quick ferry ride over to the island. We go right on the beach. We take the boat out, we pull the crab pots, then right there on the shore, we got the bucket of beer, we got the boil pot going on. We sit there, we cook up all the Dungeness crab you've ever seen in your life. You pick it, clean it, drink beers, you throw it right in the sea, you got your toes in the water, the whole thing. We take people out sailing. I got a big 30-foot sailboat. I love to get people on that. We just go out, fish, we do the whole thing. So when people come up, we know that we're not exactly the easiest place to get to. So when people do come up, we do it right. We come up, we learn.
And then to make it really fun, we'll figure out a way to destroy the Seattle Seahawks so that the Cardinals can make the playoffs.
I shouldn't even bring this up, but I'm a Vikings fan, believe it or not, from my Minneapolis roots, and I didn't want to say anything. They
got $1 billion new stadium. That must be fun.
Yeah, not that they'll ever let the likes of me in it, but like one day we'll get back there.
but yeah, I want to go back there. I'm trying to think of what that island was. Named Rosario? Is Rosario an island?
There's Rosario Straits, which is kind of just runs right in front of Fidalgo Island. But yeah, there's 126 of them. So it could have been Camino, could have been Orcas, Fidalgo, probably Whidbey. Would have been closer to Seattle. But yeah, there's just a ton, and each one of them is gorgeous.
Well, I want to do a vacation back up there and take my boys, so you can make it a business trip where I can stop off and do it at your place. That would be a blast.
We love it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for all that you do for dentistry, and I will see you on the boards, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again, Howard.